Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Tactics Board. Norwich City are back on the road this weekend when they travel to West London to take on struggling QPR. They go into this one as pretty decent favourites, and it feels like the first time in a while that we've been talking in those terms. But QPR have proven at times this season that they can produce good performances, so Norwich will have to guard against complacency. You know the drill here on Tactics Board. First of all, I'm going to take you through the team that I think Johannes Hoff-Torp will pick for the game. Then we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at the hoops, some of their weaknesses, some of their strengths, and how the game could pan out. Then later on, I'm going to come on to Amana Forson and why his role in that right wing position is so key, even though he still looks like he's getting used to English football a little bit. But we're going to start with that starting lineup. So without further ado, here's the team I think Torp will choose for the game. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Callum Doyle in the centre of defence, with Kellen Fisher at left back, Kenny McLean, Anis Ben Slimane and Emiliano Marcondes in midfield, with Amana Forson on the right, Borja Sainz on the left and Ante Cianats through the middle up front. And you'll notice that team actually has no changes from Saturday's 4-2 win over Luton Town, and that doesn't mean that there aren't debates to be had. Of course, a few players coming back from injury, a couple who are in starting contention for the first time in a while, but I feel like continuity will be the way that Torp goes. We'll start with the defence, and with Jose Cordoba coming back, there are, as always, several options for Torp to choose from. You could have him in there and then put Callum Doyle out to left back again. You could bring Ben Krasene back in. You could move Kellen Fisher to right back. But it feels like none of those options really give a guarantee that Norwich will perform better than they did against Luton and than they have in recent weeks. And it feels like at the moment that gets most of their informed players in the team. It felt to me like against Luton, although Duffy made a few mistakes that you'd like to see him iron out, there were some more progressive passes and some positive work on the ball that maybe we haven't seen for the last few weeks. So I'd expect him to keep his place. Then when it comes to Fisher at left back, I'm not, I have to admit, a fan of a right-footed left back or a left-footed right back, but it feels like he needs to be in that team. And the reason why he can't be at right back is Jack Stacey, who of course has been excellent in recent weeks. So it feels like he needs to be in there. Then I suppose there's a debate about whether you bring Cordoba in for Callum Doyle as a straight swap, but it feels like, given the fact that Cordoba has missed a few weeks and the fact that Doyle has actually, I think, stepped up his performances, not only because of that change in position, but the fact that I think he had that international break to rest a little bit and to recover after a lot of game time, and it feels like he's in form. So for me, I don't see how Cordoba or any other defensive options get into that back four, and it feels like the best option for Torp is to keep it as is. Then in midfield, we spoke about the dilemma facing Torp last week, and it's something he actually referenced in his press conference. He said it's the sort of thing that he enjoys, and I think he will keep the same three that beat the Hatters last weekend. And obviously when you've got Marcelino Nunez back in starting contention, it's a hard thing to leave him on the bench. We've all seen his quality, and I think he showed that as a substitute as well. But with the amount of time that he's missed, how careful Norwich have been with his recovery, and the fact that all of the midfield players who have played in his absence have actually been in pretty good form, it feels like you don't need to rush him into this one. Like, it would maybe be an unnecessary risk when they could give him a few minutes, build him up. Then obviously they've got a game on Tuesday and they could do that again. Then you get back to the home game against Burnley the following weekend, and that feels like that might be the best opportunity to get Nunez back into the starting 11, having had a few cameos and in a game that maybe tactically will suit him a little bit better. But right now, it feels like maybe don't change or don't fix what isn't broken for Torp, although I could definitely see Nunez coming in given the quality that he has. So that will be an interesting element to watch out for when the team news drops. I think the front three speaks for itself, and obviously, as I mentioned, we'll come on to Forson a little bit in the role he plays. But I think keeping the same starting 11, even though it could be quite a different game, feels like it might be the best option for Torp. And right now, I'm leaning towards that being the one he picks. On to QPR, and there's probably nobody better to tell you about them than the man who's spent the last few days analysing them and looking at how his team can beat them. So here's a little clip from Torup's pre-match press conference where he talks about some of their struggles in recent weeks and where also Norwich need to have their guard up.
I think it's a team where they started the season being a little bit more, trying at least to be a little bit more dominant in the games, and then maybe a little bit similar to what we discussed with Plymouth. They lost out on some results, maybe also some key players in the team, and needed to be a little bit more pragmatic in their approach to the game, and I think that's what we see at the moment. Even though I think there's some good moments. I just watched yesterday the game they played against Watford, where I think also towards the end of the game that they could easily have taken the 3 points in that one, but they had some big chances towards the end. So I think it's like, yeah, actually one of all the other games in the championship. If we are not there, if we don't show up and put a performance that is up to our best, then we cannot expect to travel home again from that one with points.
As Torup said there, in an ideal world, this is a team that probably would like to dominate games more, would like to be more attacking and have more possession. And actually, that's the style that we saw Martí Cifuentes bring to QPR last season. And actually, they had quite a lot of success playing that way, but they started off this season doing a similar thing and it didn't really work out for them at all. So they have turned into a team that likes to send long balls forward and likes to sit a little bit deeper, and in a way that feels like a shame given the fact that tactically they looked so good at times last season, and Cifuentes has proven himself pretty capable of deploying that style of football as a coach. But it has got them a few more results. It feels like they're headed in the right direction, points wise at least, although they are moving fairly slowly. But it does present a different challenge for Norwich and an interesting one. But the good news is that if they can move the ball quickly, there should be opportunities for them there. That's actually something that QPR have struggled with. If teams move it slowly and there isn't really the tempo to their game, there aren't the testing passes, then they're very happy to sit in their structure. They're actually pretty well organised. They're quite solid in that sense. But as soon as you start moving them around, there are good rotations between players and you sort of put them on the back foot a little bit, that's when they can struggle, and they really struggled with that against Leeds. So that's what Norwich have to do as usual. It feels like that's something that we've said so many times on Tactics Board this season, but against those teams who like to sit deep and want to starve Norwich of chances and stop them gaining territory, that's when they have to move the ball quicker, when they have to do it with a bit more urgency. And I think we've seen that when Norwich do that, it can be really successful. So that for me is the key tactically, and it should be quite an interesting battle tomorrow. I wanted to finish with a bit of a debate about Amana Forson, who it feels like is the subject of quite an interesting discussion at the moment, because tactically he's providing a really useful function for Norwich. He's getting the best out of the players around him and giving them the chance to flourish. But individually and technically, he probably still isn't at his best and looks like he's somebody still acclimatising to life in England. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about him and the role that he fulfills. And there are plenty of benefits to it. I think one of them, and something we've spoken about quite a lot actually, is Jack Stacey and how it gives him the opportunity to flourish out wide. Of course, if he had somebody who was a bit more of a traditional winger in front of him, even an Ante Cianats who's played quite wide in that role at times this season as well, Onel Hernandez, somebody like that, then maybe that space wouldn't be there for Jack Stacey. Not only would he have one of his own players in front of him, but that winger would be attracting players out wide and the fullbacks would be there, and maybe they would have more bodies to stop somebody like Stacey getting the ball into the box and having the space to provide those fantastic deliveries that he has been in the last few weeks. But having Forson there really helps him, because not only does he come from quite an inside starting position, he isn't often going really wide to create the space to try and receive the ball. He actually starts quite far inside, so that space is always there. But then when he receives it, he has such an open body position, and you can tell that his first inclination is either to go over to the left side of the pitch or to look for goal. And that means that everyone is focused then on the ball going inside. And of course, Forson usually would play the pass inside, but then that means whoever receives that has the opportunity to find Jack Stacey and usually absolutely Akers out wide. And that's where we can see Norwich can get the best out of him. I think up front, there's a service for Seaman as well that maybe there isn't with a usual winger, and we know that Seaman can be effective from headers, and I think that's an important thing to say because he hasn't really been so far for Norwich. Should have scored one against Plymouth Argyle, but actually at his previous club, Rakov, that was quite a big part of his game, and quite a few of his goals were scored from that area. But it's not an area where Norwich have managed to get the best out of him yet. So actually having somebody in that right wing role who can interchange passes with him seems to really help. I think Seaman is quite an intelligent player, and he's usually available for 1-2s. We've seen a couple of times where Forson will play almost a bounce pass off Seaman, and then the opportunity opens up to play him through on goal. And actually that's where the technical problems come into play, because he hasn't usually been able to find that final pass or execute that shot when the opportunities opened up for him as a result. But you can see where the avenues are for productivity in that sense, and his combination with Seaman. So I think defensively it's also helpful because, to be honest, that feels like something he's working on at the moment, and physicality maybe isn't his strongest point. You can tell he gets through a lot of running and he is quite an athlete, but he doesn't really have that physical profile, and therefore when you have him in midfield and he's got to battle for balls, he's got to compete with, experienced championship midfielders who do have that physicality, that's when he's lost out a lot of the time, and that's when you hear the groans from the crowd and things seem to get on top of him and he struggles a little bit. So I think having him out there on the right helps him in that sense, and there are definitely a few benefits. What you'd like to see is him making the most of his talent, and I think everyone saw that talent when he first arrived at the club. He was really good at taking the ball in and turning quickly and producing moments for Norwich and giving them a bit of an attacking thrust, but he seems to have lost that confidence, and you'd say that actually he's sort of building it up at the moment. He's getting some minutes, he's providing a more valuable contribution to the team, and I'm sure he's feeling that, but still it feels like he's got plenty more gears to go through given the talent that he has got. So I suppose you have to look at that as a positive if you're Torup, and you have to see that as something that can grow. And you look at this team doing so well, and they've still got Josh Sargent to come back, and they've still got Amana Forson to get to his best. He's not even close to his best at the moment in terms of that technical ability. So there is definitely a player there who's playing a very interesting tactical role at the moment, and it's something that's definitely worth watching out for against QPR, because it is one of the more interesting tactical aspects of the Norwich team at the moment. But that will just be one facet of what will be a very complex and interesting game. Of course, we'll have every kick covered across our channels, so go to pinkun.com/subscribe if you haven't already. I think we've got a few deals on, so make the most of those and you won't miss any of our coverage. Thank you very much for joining me on Tactics Board. I'll see you before that trip to Portsmouth on Tuesday, when hopefully we have a win on the road to talk about at QPR.